Power, control, governing, law, order, and civilization are only possible through force. Such is how empires work. Force is quintessential to rule. The only absolute way to ensure your continued dominion over your subjects is to command the supremacy of force. To be able to summon so much force that any reasonable human being would weigh that the cons of subjugation are not nearly as bad as the cons of rebellion. It is important to note that not all force is violence, but all violence is force. And so, when I say that an empire must maintain the absolute supremacy of force, I mean most obviously the capacity for violence, the ability to kill rebels and otherwise beat people into submission. But force also includes many other things. For example, the threat of brutal violence is also force. A dissident is suppressed so long as he thinks you can do unto him and anyone he knows so much violence that his freedom would be over nothing but ashes. Less obvious avenues of force also exist. For example, if you can control the social networks of your subjects, you can turn the folk of your dissidents into deterrents. Naturally, it's hard to see rebellion as a good thing if anyone you know who has any sort of social influence sees rebellion as a bad thing. Cultural control is another avenue. Requiring great delicacy to control, it can be the most powerful of all avenues. Controlling this can eliminate the very identity that this dissident holds that sees himself as oppressed under an oppressor. It is hard to rebel when you cannot even conceive of an enemy. If you've ever seen my videos before, you understand how much culture affects the very way we see reality. To control it is more than mind control. It is the ability to counter thoughts before they even enter the mind. Economic control may also prove to be its own little bag of tricks. Your interest in your subjects may be as economic assets to your empire, to which this somewhat limits the abilities of economy to be used as a weapon. For example, poor, hungry peasants make very poor economic assets. However, poor, hungry peasants also make very poor rebels. Famines are a damp environment for any spark of rebellion. This is force. Force is projected onto the subject through these avenues. In order for you to maintain control of your empire, you must be able to project force, no matter the avenue, throughout her territory. A given region and the people who live there have a certain potential for force. If you want to maintain control of this region, you have to be able to project and maintain more force than the regional potential. However, this is not good enough. You have to maintain exponentially more force. So much so that the subjects are not even tempted to rebel. The reason for this is because the maintenance in capacity for overwhelming violence has diminishing returns. This fact represents the greatest limitation of violence. Violence must be used quickly and decisively. This violence must be strictly contained to clearly defined targets. The targets of violence must be dealt with wholly and entirely. Nothing must remain. Violence must be used in this way, because violence creates more violence. People who have had violence done unto them will harbor hatred, a burning desire for retribution. People who have had violence done unto them unjustly will harbor even more hatred. And people made to simply see the brutality of violence will also hate you. When violence is unrestrained, highly visible, and grotesquely brutal, even the most complicit subject is forced to rebellion. The interest of the subject is self-preservation. If you remove him the ability to do so, he can only rebel. That is why it is imperative to prevent armed rebellion before it even begins. Sure, your empire is strong enough to crush whatever your subject might muster, but the more rebellions, the more you have to kill, and the more of them there will be. Uncontrolled, this cycle will continue until the last man, and the dead make very poor subjects. It is essential that you maintain the ability for unparalleled violence, but it must never be used, only known. By now, you must have thought this to yourself at some point, but the Roman Empire made all sorts of nice things for their subjects, like baths and aqueducts. Surely force is not needed if you can provide your subjects with nice things. Well, there is some truth to that. If your subjects are happy, that does lower the regional potential for force, which allows you to reduce how much resources get spent on maintaining the supremacy of force in the region. However, nice things will only ever help. Exponential supremacy will always need to be maintained. Why? Because humans are fickle creatures. How much humans are taken by nice things changes over time. What is constant, however, is force. Doing something of your own volition and being forced to do that same thing makes no difference to the empire. Humans can always be trusted to act in their own interests. Force is the only thing that will allow you to control their interests. Humans can always be counted to act in favor of their own interests. Force is just the thing that allows you to control those interests. The interest of people to continue to live, to build, to prosper, to hurt, and to steal can all be granted or denied with force.